It was an emphatic victory for Arsenal yesterday as they won 4-0 against Sparta Prague, winning the tie overall 5-1 on aggregate. And it was a performance, especially that first half, Perry, where I was sitting thinking, where's this Arsenal been throughout the season? I don't know how you thought when you were watching.
Earlier I was nervous because Arsenal are the story. One of the big clubs is always a story, and Arsenal's a story. And all the neutrals, which you understand, we're looking at thinking, Arsenal going to get beat here. They're under massive pressure. Got a decent result against Sheffield United, so you hope the confidence sort of builds up. And it was just the way that we started, whereby like Slavia Prague want to play out from the back. They didn't look particularly comfortable, and we played a little bit higher up and started to press. And then having the Smith Rowe goal disallowed could set you back, but it didn't. It kicked us on. Smith Rowe and Saka were excellent. Pepe
looked pretty decent, I thought, as well.
He's been very good in the Europa League, Pepe, and I think that suits him at the moment a bit more than the Premier League because it's not as physical and you get a little bit more space. But the two young lads, and they've contributed hugely to that performance, like they did when Arteta was under pressure before, when we had won, I think it was 1 in 8, and we played Chelsea, and he put the younger players in, and their enthusiasm and their sort of desire and will rubbed off on the other players. So I thought Partey was very good last night as well. The two centre-halves were aggressive, like Holding and Murray, when the ball was coming into Kucera was playing up front for Slavia Prague. And Slavia Prague had been unbeaten at home for over a year. I think it was 34 games. And they'd beaten Leicester and they'd beaten Rangers. So they weren't any sort of walkovers. Arsenal should be expected to win that sort of game, but it was an impressive performance. But the problem we have as Arsenal fans watching, as Bob said there, is Arsenal are an immature team at the moment. I don't mean by age, I mean by the way that they are, not just from game to game, actually in games. Because you saw against West Ham, really poor for 35 minutes, 3-0 down, then get themselves out of trouble. So there's not the consistency there. And I know that the comparisons are there with Unai Emery, and there is a sort of symmetry because Unai Emery started off really well at Arsenal, and he lost his way towards the end of his tenure because he picked a bad team against Crystal Palace when we could have got in the top 4 and we lost that game, concentrated on Europa League, got hammered by Chelsea, and then he lost his way and his confidence, and the players lost confidence in him. Arteta's having a dip, but I just looked at that Europa League final against Chelsea. Out of the 23 matchday squad, 17 players aren't there anymore or are out on loan. So it just shows you the amount of players that he had to move on. I think at the starting 11, it was only Xhaka, Lacazette and Aubameyang who are still there at the moment, which is a huge sort of turnaround.
Oh, absolutely. There's not any denial that actually it's been a huge job for Mikel Arteta to, as you say, recycle some of those players that they've not wanted. They've needed to ship out players. They've needed to move things around. And obviously Mikel Arteta's come in to try and put his style on the team as well. And this isn't a conversation to simply bash Arsenal because they're on a high right now. They're through to the Europa League semi-finals. But it is just interesting to get your take on where you see Arsenal at right now. When you consider their Premier League stats, because you've mentioned there Nicolas Pepe doing really well in the Europa League, but less so in the Premier League, maybe due to the physicality of the domestic league. But if we look at some of the stats, and now Mikel Arteta has now managed the same number of Premier League games at Arsenal as Unai Emery, but he's won 10 points fewer. There's also been less goals with Mikel Arteta at the helm, 20 less goals, in fact. You can also see that in terms of actual goals conceded and clean sheets, it's been better.
Yeah, defensively,
under Mikel Arteta.
we are better, without a shadow of a doubt. There is more of a tightness there than under Unai Emery. The thing with Arteta is, I think I've got to be honest, I think the jury's out because he went in, wanted to put his mark on. Pep Guardiola's obviously a big influence on him, and he wants to play out from the back and he wants to press. At the moment, we haven't got as good players as Man City to play out from the back and play that expansive football. So he's got to get that sort of balance right. He's learning his trade, where I said before, and the same thing Frank Lampard at Chelsea, you can't have like one of the biggest clubs like in the country, in Europe, with a manager that basically is an apprentice, because he's going to make mistakes. I don't think he's handled the Aubameyang situation particularly, not necessarily because of the malaria case, but
previous to that.
Because he's your captain, so you make him captain, and your senior players and your captain, they dominate the dressing room. If you could think at Liverpool, it's always Jordan Henderson, Virgil van Dijk, James Milner. They control the dressing room. So the manager needs a good relationship with his captain. and he's late before the Tottenham game. Now, I don't know whether he was late in the hotel or he was in traffic, but he drops him where maybe you could give him a rollicking in front of all the players and fine him 2 weeks' wages, and then the captain owes you and says, look, you better not let me down. I've backed you here. Then Liverpool game where he's under par, now we find out it's because of he was had malaria, and then he drops him, you know, and makes him sub for the Slavia Prague game. So that little bit of trust in your captain is gone. And, you know, it's just little things where he's learning his way. He should play the same two centre-halves and get, again, consistency at the back, which he doesn't. He keeps changing his two centre-halves around. But the performance last night, all it's done, Natalie, to be honest, is it's just quelled the noise. There was a lot of noise around Arsenal, and he was going to be the story. Now, for 2 weeks, it'll be someone else. There'll be another big team that gets a couple of bad results. And then we all know full well, in the semi-final against Villarreal, that's Arsenal's season in a nutshell, is the Europa League. If we win Europa League... This is what
I was going to say, because you said the jury's still out.
Yes.
So how does Mikel Arteta convince the jury?
Wins Europa League. You win Europa League, because, again, it's a trophy. He's got the FA Cup in the bank, which, again, is giving him a little bit more kudos with Arsenal fans, because he normally hadn't won a trophy. So we won a trophy when we weren't even very good last year. So
what if he doesn't win? What happens?
He will be... I don't think Arsenal and hierarchy there... Arsenal are not a hiring, firing club by their history. I don't think they'll get rid of him. I think they'll give him until the start of next season and see how it starts, because Arteta will say, I've still got some players to move out. Now this is my team and my squad of players, and then there's no more excuses. But at the moment, I think he micromanages a little bit too much.